Here we go. Happy Thursday to all of you guys. Off the Hook, Caleb Calhoun with Off the Hook here, joined by Caleb Jaru, who is back on, wasn't able to come on yesterday. Got a huge show lined up for you guys today. We've got interesting take, disrespecting former recently departed Tennessee football quarterback Hendon Hooker. We've got news on the Vols basketball schedules. Josh Ward joins us at 10:25 after. So Jaru's going to be here in the first segment. Josh Ward will be in the second segment. And we've got some interesting stories on athletes and new regulations and rights for them, along with a scandal going down in Georgia that Jaru and I are going to talk about. So welcome to the show. Caleb, Jaru, how are you today?
I'm doing good. The Caleb and Caleb show lives on this Thursday. How are you?
Doing great. It absolutely does as we wrap up June. And funny enough, Jaru, where I live, in 2 days, weed's going to be legal recreationally.
Well, I guess I don't know if I should say congratulations or.
Not saying I'm going to take part, but
I was going to say, however you want to take it, Calhoun. Maybe you just have some aroma for the streets now.
Yes, exactly. All right, so let's go ahead and dive in. We got one to dive in with immediately. So I've been hating on Brad Crawford all week, guys. I'm sorry. We do a lot of stuff on things he writes because he does a lot of great work. A lot of times we tout what he does. Sometimes we hate on what he does, and I'm going to continue the hate train because he wrote an article yesterday on the top 16 all-time transfer quarterbacks. And Tennessee's Hendon Hooker was not on the list. Now, come on. Now, okay, there's some top ones here that I understand you would put at the top. Okay, Joe Burrow, no issue there. Transfer, won the Heisman national title. Baker Mayfield, no issue there. Won the Heisman. However you feel about Baker in the NFL. Cam Newton, no issue. Transfer, won the Heisman national title. Caleb Williams, no issue. Won the Heisman. I'm still everybody I've named I'm fine with. Even Jalen Hurts, I'm good with being on there. But, okay, Joe, let me just name some other people on here real quick. I think Hendon Hooker has a case over Justin Fields. I think he's got a case over Russell Wilson. Rest in peace. We spoke about him yesterday. Ryan Mallett. He has a case over Ryan Mallett, but I don't want to get into that. Has a case over Colt Brennan. Scott Frost won a national title, but running the triple option at Nebraska. And Jake Coker won the national title as a game manager from Alabama, so I'm not counting that. And then you got Nick Marshall, Jeff George, Vince Ferragamo from Cal to Nebraska in 1976, and Nick Foles from Michigan State to Arizona. Come on. Are we to say that all these transfer quarterbacks were better than Hendon Hooker?
It's funny as you get to the top of the list, it's all the recent quarterbacks who transferred, like Joe Burrow, Jalen Hurts. And then you get like 14 and 13. Like you said, Jake Coker, I guess, is kind of recent, 2015. But then you've got Jeff George, who won the Sammy Ball Trophy in 1989.
Right, exactly.
Nick Foles is 16. I can even understand that one a little bit just from a recency standpoint. But there's some guys on here like Vince Ferragamo, who was an All-American in 1976. Oh. And his only stat on here that's like jumping off the page is his 32 career rushing touchdowns ranked 10th in program history. So he wasn't even throwing the ball. He was running.
Yeah.
So I agree. I don't see how Hendon Hooker is not in like at least 16 on the list.
Right. I mean, let's just pull up Hendon Hooker's stats the last 2 years. I mean, we're talking about a guy who, I believe his first year he threw 31 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. Last year he would have gone to New York were it not for the injury, and I still say he should have gone to New York. But yeah, completed 70% of his passes, averaged 9.5 yards an attempt, 27 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. At Tennessee in 2 years, he had 58 touchdowns and 5 interceptions, and he ran for another 10 touchdowns and over 1,000 yards rushing, over 6,000 yards passing. I'm sorry. I don't know how you could leave Hendon Hooker off this list. Now, I think this goes to an interesting take, which is Hendon Hooker is the greatest transfer in Tennessee football history, isn't he? I don't think there's a close second.
No, he basically revived the program and put Josh Heupel and Tennessee back on the map. Think about it. If they beat South Carolina and he stays healthy, they're probably competing for a playoff spot.
Oh, yeah. If they beat South Carolina, they're in the playoff, and he's in New
Yeah,
York.
exactly. So, I mean, he would basically, I mean, some of these guys on the list, he lists that they ranked 5th or 6th in Heisman voting. Well, Hooker did the same thing.
Yeah.
So then by that token, should he not be on, like, and we're not arguing that he should be above a guy like Joe Burrow who holds every record, won a championship. We're saying he should be above Nick Marshall or Jeff George because those guys are not. I mean, Jeff George has one sentence under his, and it's a future number 1 overall pick in the NFL. His 31 career touchdown passes with the Illinois ranked 10th all time in program history.
So he's 10th in Illinois.
Yeah. So that's not something like to write home about. And it was, I agree. I think at least Hendon Hooker should be, I'd say he would probably fall. I would say 14th would be a good spot at least, just because he's super recent and you don't know how much impact he has on the program long term, which I think Joe Milton will just leverage off of what Hendon Hooker did and then Nico after him, and it'll just keep rolling. But I get that he's, I don't know. I think he should be 14 or 15 at least.
I agree. I'm right around that level too, 14th or 15th of best transfer quarterbacks of all time. And I'm going down the list now, and Hooker should have been an All-American. I think we both agree with that. He kind of got robbed of All-American honors. But I don't believe there are junior college transfers that were All-Americans, but I don't really count junior college transfers unless they were at another school and went to junior college like Cam Newton. That's a different story. But outside of that, I mean, I'm going down the list of all-time All-Americans in Tennessee football history, and I don't know. I think Hendon Hooker should have been on there, so I have him as the best transfer. I think the closest second would be Alvin Kamara, right? It's Hendon Hooker and Alvin Kamara, and then it's everybody else.
Yeah, but unfortunately, Alvin Kamara was kind of handicapped in Tennessee's offense, so we never got to see the true, like the Alvin Kamara you see in the NFL right now. We didn't get to see that at Tennessee, which I really wish we would have, because it could have been very good.
Jaru, you just don't understand. Butch Jones knew what he was doing. He was so analytical driven, okay, and he had a chart on when to do things, and you just aren't on his level of intellect. Don't you know that?
I just don't understand the brick by brick. That's what it is.
Yes, exactly.
He was going brick by Alvin Kamara. Just wasn't the brick that he needed.
Inches make the chain. Well, and in the NFL, Alvin Kamara ain't one of the most life championships. I will say that. I'm sorry, that's horrible to say, but
oh my gosh.
But
no, Hendon Hooker should 100% be on this list. I mean, what he did for Tennessee, and really Josh Heupel, I mean, revived a program that was dead and full of allegations to competing for a playoff spot in his second season, and then next season set up to do the same.
Yeah, and there's no doubt that if Joe Milton no disrespect to Joe Milton, but he wasn't ready to start in 2021. If Hendon Hooker doesn't come in, Tennessee's not going 7-6. They're probably 5-7 or something like that. There's a couple of games they lose if Hendon Hooker's not in there, particularly the Kentucky one. Is there a chance, would you say, that Joe Milton surpasses Hendon Hooker this year? Because, he would be a transfer too, coming from Michigan.
I mean, maybe. I don't think you can credit Joe Milton with reviving the program as much, because Hendon Hooker was the first to do it, kind of give Tennessee life, fill the stadium again. But obviously on the field, I think Joe Milton could compete if he plays how people are saying he's going to play this season. That one is a tough one just because they're back-to-back, both transfers. I mean, Hendon Hooker did a lot of stuff for Tennessee that'll be hard to replicate. But if somebody's going to replicate it as a transfer, I don't see why Joe Milton couldn't.
Yeah, no, that's true. And, with a couple more years, he's now been in the system 3 years, which may help. Although people say that, I think you and I are both, I don't think being in the system that long in Heupel's system means that much. I think you learn it. I think quarterbacks pick it up I think it's a pretty easy system to pick up for a quarterback.
I wouldn't, I agree with you kind of. I would say, obviously, having a year or two in the system helps. 3, I think at that point it's kind of redundant. I agree with you. It's not like they're doing anything super, super crazy. And Joe Milton came from Michigan, which, I mean, their offense isn't – Jim Harbaugh is supposed to be an offensive mastermind too. So it's not like he's immune to learning offenses.
Right, exactly. Good morning to you, Rocky Top Tom. Travis says that Tennessee should have made it the playoff over Alabama. Well, yeah, if either one would have been in it, it should have been Tennessee. But I think they got the playoff, the top 4 right. Quite honestly, I made the case last year they should have just had a top 2, and it should have been Georgia versus Michigan because those were the only 2 teams. BCS would have worked. But about Cooter, yep, just what we were talking about. Could say Milton is the greatest at the end of the season. And yes, Rocket Top Tom, it is Caleb squared. It is. Fun fact, I am Caleb Calhoun, so my initials are also C squared. Some people used to call me that. Although my first name is actually John. So, Jerry, I don't know how well you know history, but John C. Calhoun was a really bad guy. My mom didn't know history. My mom and dad did not know history, named me that. I've trolled them about it since.
I don't know history either, so I have my research assignment for later.
Okay, well, John C. Calhoun was the guy that, after the slave trade ended in 1807, John C. Calhoun was making the case in 1845 that the slave trade should still continue. Not slavery itself, the slave trade, which even slave owners were like, okay, this is immoral and we shouldn't do it. Okay.
Yikes. So, he was the former vice president?
He was the vice president under Andrew Jackson, yeah. And then they had a big fight over the nullification crisis.
Well, you can change the name.
Yeah, it was.
Thanks the legacy.
He was not a good dude. Moving on, speaking of a great transition to not good dudes, by the way, going on to here, we got to talk a little bit about this is an awful story. I encourage you guys. The AJC broke it, and now CBS Sports has a story on it too. Georgia defensive lineman Jamal Jarrett faced sexual assault underage drinking allegations as a recruit per report. And according to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Jarrett is part of a larger look into the program's handling of sexual violence violations, where there seems to be a rally around players that get these violations with Georgia. Another case that was cited was former Georgia linebacker Adam Anderson. On November 10th, 2021, Anderson turned himself into police and was charged with felony rape during his bond hearing. 8 players from Georgia's football team, including Jalen Carter, James Cook, Quay Walker, who Tennessee targeted heavily during the Jeremy Pruitt years, advocated for his release and testified in favor of his character. 11 players during Kirby Smart's tenure have remained on the team despite women reporting violent encounters to the police, the university, or both, according to the report. Real quick, dozens of players, according to the Journal, or to the AJC, have engaged in activities like excessive speed, straight racing, and driving under the influence. We've talked about those, but this is a different story. Jaru, this is really, really a bad look. Now, me being in the weeds of a lot of Tennessee cases, the A.J. Johnson case, the Jalen McCullough case, I know context happens even if there's multiple allegations against multiple different people. And so we have to be fair here. But if Georgia is just reflexively rallying to the support of players who are charged without evidence or facts, that's a big problem.
This line made it even worse for me. It was like, because you talked about Adam Anderson and the players went to talk about his character at the trial. Anderson's attorney, told the judge that he made a promise to Kirby Smart that the players advocating for Anderson would be released early to return to football activities. So that basically implicates Kirby Smart in like helping these players get off scot-free from trial or anything like that. And then the next line says the athletic department denied that Smart was involved in sending players to Anderson's hearing, according to the AJC's report. So at least Anderson was suspended indefinitely and did not play after he was charged. But still, you see Kirby Smart apparently talking to the attorney and asking if the players can return to football activities. Like, I feel like in that situation, football should be the last thing anybody's worried about.
Right, exactly. The way to handle this is, again, Jaru and I are both on the same side here. I'm pretty sure we're not one that says lock somebody up, throw away the key because they're charged with anything. That's not how you do this. They have a process, and there's an appropriate way to handle it. The not appropriate way to handle it is to reflexively and immediately send people to go work with the legal team and law enforcement and send your players to go defend somebody who's charged for something. That's not the way to handle this. That is as close to tampering as it can get, honestly, in a case. And with Kirby Smart, given how gung-ho lackadaisical he's been with so many other players getting in trouble with his program. I mean, just things like, the Georgia recruit that did the Asian slur during the NFL draft. I haven't seen a punishment for him. Have you? I mean, and that's one of those where I don't think he's been punished for life or suspended for a season, but you could suspend him for a game just to say, hey, you can't do that. You can't throw slurs against communities when you're on this football team. Nothing. And this is a really, really, really big deal. And again, Georgia signed Jamal Jarrett, who was a member of the 2023 class. He broke curfew, drank alcohol with teammates at an Athens bar, and was taken, which, okay, fine, that's not a big deal to not sign somebody, but then was taken to the police station under investigation for sexual assault while he was 16 years old. And this is just really, again, if you want to say my way to handle this is this, if I'm Kirby Smart or Josh Heupel, you tell me if this is right or wrong. To what I would say is, look, they're going to be suspended from team activities indefinitely. But I'm going to give the legal system a certain amount of time to handle this. If they don't handle this within this amount of time, I'm letting them back on the team because you're innocent until proven guilty and you have a right to a speedy trial. So I understand, and that's controversial. That's a little too player friendly to a lot of people. But I'm not one of those people A.J. Johnson lost 4 years of his football career because this trial drug out, and that shouldn't have happened. I would say you got 6 months. I would say with Heupel, you got this many months to build a case against Jalen McCullough. If you don't build a case against him, you just indicted him. If you don't build a case against him, I'm playing him. Period. End of story. And I think that's how you do it. But I'm not sitting here reflexively saying everybody go defend Jalen McCullough or everybody go defend A.J. Johnson or everybody go defend a Georgia player or anything like that. That's not how you go about this, because then again, you're tampering with the case. I mean, that's fireable to me.
You keep bringing up Josh Heupel. I don't think we'll ever see anything of this magnitude happen at Tennessee when Josh Heupel's here and Danny White. It just doesn't seem like their mantra to try to do this. I mean, you even look at Jalen McCullough. He missed, I can't remember, 1 or 2 games, right? They waited until the university, who is his ruling body when he's at college, cleared him to play again. And even in his situation, obviously we don't know the context, but I say it's very hard to compare the Jalen McCullough situation and this situation in the same sentence. So, I mean, Jalen McCullough was defending his apartment. Like, a person came inside his home. That's very different from and that's very different from what these athletes, from my understanding, are committing at Georgia. And, I mean, the athletic department is liable in this too, because if Kirby Smart actually was talking to the attorney and sent the players to the trial, and the athletic department turns around and says Kirby Smart had no involvement, and this report comes out, I mean, the AJC is basically showing you that the athletic department is looking away from everything that's happening. I mean, it seems like once a week there's a player arrested for speeding, and you see a story about a Georgia player driving recklessly. That's program standards. It seems like if you have a program where they know the punishment, or like a Tennessee where the athletic department is well run now after years of turmoil, I don't think you'd ever see anything like this.
Yeah. It's I agree. It's a very I know this covering Georgia. During the Mark Richt years, Georgia had the integrity model, and they had more integrity than any other program. And I think a lot of people at Georgia feel that cost them national titles. So I think when they hired Kirby Smart, they decided we're sick of integrity and let's just throw it to the window, which I get. Like, there is a healthy balance here. You don't have to be like Notre Dame, but you don't have to be Urban Meyer at Florida either. I mean, you can kind of strike a little bit of a balance.
Yeah, I agree. I think there has to be a balance somewhere. The Notre Dame, Brian Kelly at Notre Dame, they were super strict. I mean, even academically, there's some stuff they did that probably cost them on the field. But, I mean, you have to have some control over your program in some way. Like you said, even if it's setting a timeline, like, hey, if this guy isn't charged in X amount of time, or you don't have enough case against him in X amount of time, then we're just going to play him because he doesn't have all day to sit or all his life to sit around and wait on this case. But it just seems like there's nothing. They don't even talk about it. Like, I haven't seen Kirby Smart or the athletic department besides to the AJC release a statement about any of these cases.
I haven't either. Kirby Smart has not talked literally at all about the issues of discipline throughout the program, but we already talked about the lack of discipline. I mean, this is next level brazen. Usually it's a slow burn on a program that kind of culminates in a while. It's all one off season for Georgia. It's just happening out of the blue. So it's kind of crazy. Comment by Rocket Top Tom says the DA at Knoxville is either overzealous or we don't know something key to the McCullough thing with regards to Jalen McCullough. You don't indict as a DA unless you have a solid lock for conviction. Rocket Top Tom, I will tell you, the DA, I think you pronounce her first name Sharm P. Allen, is the same DA that indicted A.J. Johnson, and there was an acquittal, and literally spent 4 years bringing a case, and there was an acquittal within 30 minutes. So I think we can safely say overzealous as the right word. That would be the right assumption based on that case if you're looking at this case, although, again, we don't know all the details. But, yeah, based on the A.J. Johnson case, overzealous is probably the right word. So, Jaru, going to let you out here. I know you got some things you got to get to, but I'll just ask you real quick. Where does this end for Georgia?
I mean, I assume you have to open either I don't think we can trust the NCAA to investigate anybody anymore. So I feel like you have to, and it can't be Georgia investigating themselves because they're obviously not very good at this, it seems. So I think you have to get an outside body of some sort, like an agency, to investigate Georgia and then come away and find out if it's the athletic department that's doing this or if it's rogue players. And then I don't know how long that takes. I don't know what'll be the end of it, but I don't see a way where they can just sweep this under the rug anymore because the AJC has found some pretty damning information and it doesn't seem like they're going to stop investigating anytime soon.
Yep, I agree. Portions of the program brought to you by Craft Treats. CraftTreats.com is your home for the best pet treats in the world. They even have CBD-infused treats that can minimize your pet's digestive, arthritic, or anxiety issues. Go to CraftTreats.com. Jaru, thanks for doing this. You have a good rest of your day, and we will see you tomorrow.
I'll see y'all tomorrow. Caleb and Caleb show.
Yep, definitely. We'll be on. I got him all day tomorrow, guys, so he can't go anywhere. All right, guys. We will be back in 2 minutes, and we'll have Josh Ward on, and we got a little basketball and a little more football news to talk. So 2 minutes. Stick with us.
And Craving Wings South North Shore location, where we've heard people say that you can get the best wings in East Tennessee. Pero ¿quién es este? El número 87, Jacob Warren.
I'll just do 6 on my sauce 87, please.
Imposible, señorita. Dale 6 más. Look at these wings. Perfectas, deliciosas, fantásticas.
Man, I don't know what you're saying, but it sounds awesome. How do you say fresh, never frozen in Spanish?
Frescas, nunca congeladas. Make your way to Craving Wings and get you 6 más.
What was funny about Cadis, we were a full continuum of care at that time. We had detox, we had inpatient, we had outpatient. So we were doing a lot of the things that we do now. But now we just do them so much better. It's really a simple program, but we're complicated people. I am what I am, and now I got to do something about it.
You can take your life back. Call Cadis today.
Got cataracts? We can fix that. Never miss another moment. With a little help from Doctors Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn at cctis.com.
Do you want to own the more that owns every job? Then get to Vassey Lawn and Garden in Cleveland and get you a Toro. I'm David Vassey, here to talk to you about Toro. With a Toro Zero Turn, you'll get more out of every minute and you'll reach the finish line faster. At Vassey's, we like to say, no matter if you're mowing 3 acres a week or 11 lawns a day, homeowners and business owners alike find confidence in equipment they can trust from top to bottom.
Vassey Lawn and Garden, Highway 60 North in Cleveland.
Man alive, it's worth the drive.
Our family has been creating jewelry since 1986, each piece unique with a story all its own. I'm Rick Terry with Rick Terry Jewelry Designs. I'm a jeweler, and I want to be your jeweler. We're grateful that you chose us to be Knoxville's best jeweler. My family and staff look forward to serving you. So please come see us. Kingston Pike and Campbell Station Road in the heart of Farragut and downtown on Gay Street, right next to the Tennessee Theater.
Welcome back to the show. We're going to bring in Josh Ward in just a minute. We talked a little bit about the Georgia case a second ago, and we got some basketball news. But let's go ahead and bring in Josh Ward now. Josh, how are you doing?
Good, Caleb. Great to be with you.
Thanks. Good to be with you, too. I guess we'll actually start with, I wanted to talk about this with you specifically, Tennessee basketball. The ACC SEC Challenge slate came out yesterday, and Tennessee is going to, the men's side is facing North Carolina. The women's side is facing Notre Dame. Also found out that the Lady Vols SEC schedule is going to include Vandy, who they play twice every year, but then they draw South Carolina and A&M as their other rotating opponents that they're going to play twice. So I guess I'll just start there. That's kind of a brutal draw, right, for the SEC schedule for women's basketball?
Yeah, especially South Carolina, which has kind of led the way nationally with what they've done with Don Staley's program. So that's tough. Tennessee's schedule's tough out of conference. Notre Dame would be included in that conversation. LSU is also changing the conversation in women's basketball in the SEC with what that team did last season, winning the national title, and is now a transfer destination, it appears, with how we saw this offseason go. But South Carolina is still going to have something to say about winning a national title. Also, though, if Tennessee wants to be a national title contender, it needs to prove that it can beat those teams. Beating lesser opponents in the SEC and being competitive but not beating powerful non-conference teams, it's nice for a resume, but that's not going to get Tennessee where it wants to go. So if Tennessee wants to compete for a Final Four and the national title, which is the expectation this year, it also needs to show that it can beat those teams in the regular season. So in basketball, where you have margin for error, I think it's a good thing that those teams are on the schedule.
Yeah, I agree. I actually said that. It's funny. Yesterday, when we were talking about the men's schedule and them drawing Texas A&M and the rotating opponents, I believe it was Alabama. Mm-hmm. Given the SEC being in a down year next year, I think the men's team needed the tougher draws for the SEC slate.
Yeah, maybe so. Again, Tennessee will play a good non-conference schedule, but home and away, getting tested away from home is good for a resume opportunity in terms of trying to bolster it for the NCAA tournament and also testing your team so that they're ready for the NCAA tournament when that comes around, because Tennessee will be there. Tennessee will be an NCAA tournament team, barring an absolute disaster. Tennessee should go in as one of the top 3 teams, I think, in the SEC. If that's the case, there should be no fear of playing a tough home and away rotation and playing a tough conference schedule. Maybe it affects Tennessee's ability to win an outright SEC title, which is one of the goals going in. But at this point, I don't know anybody that is valuing what happens in the regular season in the SEC over opportunities in the postseason, and really meaning the NCAA tournament. So whatever Tennessee can do to help its NCAA tournament chances should be the priority.
Yep, totally agree. I've always said that. I've said that the NCAA tournament selection committee has made it pretty clear. I mean, they made it more clear in the RPI, but they still make it pretty clear now using the BPI that they're going to value who you play way more than your record. I mean, they care less about your record than the college football playoff committee does.
Yeah, it matters as a percentage of the overall conversation, but there's the record, there's the performance against those high-quality opponents that you face. Avoiding losses against bad teams will matter too, but do you play a tough schedule? Do you try in the non-conference slate? The conference schedule is not up to the teams. That's given to them, but who you're playing is still going to matter on the resume. And Rick Barnes arrived at Tennessee with his history, with what he has done over the course of his career, with the ability to get games on Tennessee's schedule that previous coaches could not get. This North Carolina matchup is an ACC-SEC challenge, but that's also a statement of where the program is. North Carolina is a huge draw. It's a major name, one of the biggest in college basketball, meaning that game is a big draw. They're not going to put Tennessee in that game if Tennessee is not worthy from a talent standpoint, how good the team will be, but also the brand of Tennessee basketball right now. It is a major one. So that's a compliment to Tennessee. Being in these games that Tennessee has played against North Carolina and Kansas and Gonzaga, East Coast to West Coast, Arizona the last couple of years, is a big deal. It helps Tennessee present its case to the NCAA tournament committee when it gets to the end of the season. Again, you need to win your fair share of those games, but playing those games is the first step in impressing the committee and getting your team ready. I'll stress that again. Getting your team ready for tournament play. The more of those opponents you play in the regular season, the better chance you have of being ready. And if you don't schedule, you will be punished for that as well. That's not an issue for Tennessee. It has been an issue for other schools.
Yep. And just so people are aware, Tennessee visits Wisconsin this year. They now visit North Carolina. They host Illinois, and they also play NC State and San Antonio. Plus, you've got the Maui Invitational.
The Maui Invitational is loaded. It's an incredible group of teams. So, yeah, Tennessee's schedule and Tennessee's schedule away from home, away from Knoxville. I know fans want to see some of these games at Thompson Bowling Arena. I do too. But playing these games away from home, sometimes in true road games or obviously in neutral environments, that will matter to the committee too.
Oh, absolutely. And what a lot of fans, I think, need to understand about that too is that particularly, and I wanted to bring up going to North Carolina with the ACC-SEC Challenge, it's huge for recruiting to play these road games. I mean, this is why Memphis didn't want to do home and homes with Tennessee all the time, because they didn't want Tennessee to go to Memphis every other year and recruit Memphis talent. Now Tennessee gets to go into North Carolina to recruit basketball talent. They get to go to Texas to recruit talent. I mean, look, sorry, it's not as easy to recruit in Knoxville when you're hosting as it is in North Carolina or San Antonio for talent. So this is a huge deal to be able to go to these places to recruit.
Yeah, Josh Pastner came on my radio show 10 or 12 years ago, somewhere in that range, when he was Memphis's coach early in that tenure, and said, I don't want to play Tennessee home and home. It doesn't benefit me. I know it's a good game, but them coming to Memphis and having a chance to win doesn't help my program. Going to Knoxville doesn't help my program, really. So he didn't value that. For Tennessee, there is real value in going to these games. And again, the ACC-SEC Challenge, you'll have home, you'll have away, just like you had Texas home and away back-to-back years, which was really cool. That was great to see. So it's good for the game. It's great for the fans. And if Tennessee goes to Chapel Hill and wins, that's a big deal for the program. It can be good for the resume if we come back to just how it will affect Tennessee this upcoming season. But recruits know what Chapel Hill is all about. They know what the North Carolina brand is all about. Seeing Tennessee in that game, and if Tennessee wins that game, that's more for Tennessee to sell.
Yep. And so what do you think of North Carolina, of them playing North Carolina in general? Because Hubert Davis's team, obviously, after a Final Four run, really underachieved last year. Do you think they'll be back this year, or do you think it's kind of a sliding program given that Roy Williams isn't there?
Surely they're better than last year. And last year they were one of the most disappointing teams we've seen in a long time, from being a projected title winner and the top team ranked going in to not making it. So they'll be better, but I think Tennessee should be the better team. So that's a very winnable game for Tennessee. You never know in college basketball, especially going on the road. So there is that aspect to it. But this is one where Tennessee can kind of get value of beating the name, even though you might not beating a team that's as good as you are. Because Tennessee should be the better team, I think, going in the season.
No, I agree. And Mr. Jones brings up a point that Tennessee beat Duke, and if they could beat North Carolina, it'd be big for recruiting. I mean, they already beat Duke this past year. They could theoretically in the same year beat Duke, North Carolina, and NC State and be it would remind me of, remember football 2003 when they beat Florida and Miami on the road and called themselves state champs of Florida that year? Yeah,
because you know how much basketball matters there in that area, and it's the name brand value. And Tennessee has already really established itself, at least in the college basketball world, those who are paying attention, with Rick Barnes as the head coach. The brand itself from Tennessee just in general is a major one. The Power T is so recognizable. And as much as people like to joke or sometimes not joke about ESPN hating Tennessee, ESPN actually loves Tennessee because they know that people are going to watch if Tennessee's on, and that there is a draw with Tennessee, especially if Tennessee is good. Tennessee in football back at a high level is good for college football. And part of the reason that is said is because it's good for the people that are covering college football. The press box at Neyland Stadium was filled with national media members for the big games because it's a big deal when Tennessee is competing at a high level. And when Tennessee basketball is competing at a high level, is it the same as football? Is it the same as the following of, I mean, we could say Duke basketball, I guess, or Kansas? Maybe not, but the fan base is so big that it's going to hop on board, and that's already happened. And Thompson Bowling Arena ranks high every year in average attendance. And those games against Alabama last year and Texas and Kentucky, the crowds are fantastic because of the following and because of the support for Tennessee. So when Tennessee's playing in these games against Duke and North Carolina, that is attractive not only to the Tennessee fan base, but to everybody covering college basketball and when ESPN is covering.
Yep, it's funny you say that. I've debated a lot of Tennessee fans who talk about the ESPN hate. I think it was there, but I think it's from the 90s. I don't think it exists anymore. I think they realized what they lost when Tennessee football fell off. And I think it had a lot to do with, I'm just going to be honest, I think ESPN and media members in general have a bias to programs whose coaches were good interviews. And Josh, you and I both know Fulmer was not the best interview. He was not an entertaining guy to do press conferences or do one-on-ones with.
Yeah, I mean, there's the Heisman aspect, and I get that with what happened with Charles Woodson and the attention that was put on Michigan. Michigan was winning. I mean, they were a title contender, and that's another major program. So there's that aspect. But some of the names are known, some of them are not, people that work behind the scenes. There's so many UT grads that work for ESPN. So when it's brought up ESPN hates Tennessee, part of my question is, okay, who are you even talking about? Like the upper management of ESPN couldn't care less. They don't care about any of the teams. And then the people that are covering college sports, many of them have graduated from UT or they've been in Knoxville, worked in Knoxville covering Tennessee. So people outside Knoxville would make the opposite argument that there's a bias for Tennessee. It's really neither. It's just that if Tennessee's really good, they get great coverage and they get college game day to town. Like last year, ESPN came to Knoxville twice because they knew how big of a draw it was and how great of a show it would be. So a lot of people would have argued, hey, there's bias for Tennessee. It's not for or against. It's just if Tennessee's really good, they'll get a lot of positive coverage. When Tennessee wasn't so good, which unfortunately was too long of too long of a length of time, well, the coverage was pretty negative, and that was for obvious reason.
Yep, this is actually something I kind of want to transition to because it's a good segue we got to. But thinking about this, it's funny you said that because Chris Fowler had a great point years ago, and it's, we talk about the bias for or against Tennessee or the SEC, and you're right. You go outside the South, everybody thinks that ESPN and everybody's biased in favor of the SEC, and Chris Fowler had a great point. Do you really, like, to people who think there's bias towards the SEC, do y'all really think that ESPN wants college football to be this regional? Of course they don't. They think it's way better for them if the Pac-12 and the Big Ten and the ACC and the Northeast are having teams competing for the national title. They would obviously much rather that happen where they could stretch their market value of covering college football than just be stuck in the South, wouldn't they?
Yeah, probably so. I mean, if you can get USC to be a big deal, if you can have more Big Tens that are competing at a high level, Big Ten teams that are competing at a high level, and they have a big contract with the SEC. So they're not rooting against SEC teams. They don't want them to be bad. It's just, this is not a Tennessee thing, by the way. Arkansas fans think that the media hates their team, and USC and UCLA fans think that the media is out to get their teams. And same for Michigan and Ohio State. I promise you look through Ohio State message boards and they think that the national media is against them. And Georgia will say that even though they're winning national titles and getting all kinds of coverage. So that's just, I think that's human nature. But I'll ask again, when we say ESPN is against Tennessee in this case, who on earth are we even talking about? I don't know. Like, is there one person that might have an axe to grind? I guess, but that could happen anywhere. So it's not really a thing. If Tennessee's really good, which Tennessee is right now, they're going to get a lot of really positive coverage. The Friday before the Georgia game this past fall, during my show that afternoon, we went to ESPN.com because there was a story we knew of on Tennessee, and we looked, and there were 5 front page stories, all in a positive light related to Tennessee, and 1 or 2 of them might have been Tennessee and Georgia, but it was a positive light on Tennessee. Why? Because Tennessee was really good. So when Tennessee's really good, they'll get really positive coverage. If Tennessee's not good, which is not the case for any of the teams right now, then the coverage will be more negative. It really comes down to how good or bad they are.
Exactly. The only pushback I have seems to be bias for Florida State in football because I don't understand how people can think they're a top 10 team this year. But that's just me.
Well, I mean, they might be. We'll see. If they beat LSU in that opener, then playing in the ACC will give them a really good chance. The short answer would be they might have one of the best quarterbacks in the country. They have a guy that would have gone in the first round coming back as an edge rusher in Jared Verse, who chose Florida State over Tennessee. If Tennessee had him, talk about the conversation that would change with Tennessee's defense. So I don't know if Florida State's quote back, but they're one of those teams I'm most curious to see. That LSU Florida State game is going to be one of the best early games of the season.
Josh, we have peer-to-peer betting coming with Zen Sports. I'm going to bring them up in a minute, but I will do a peer-to-peer bet with you right now if we could, which is I'm setting the line at 15, and I think LSU covers. I'm that high on LSU and that low on Florida State this year.
Okay. I mean, maybe so. Last year, Florida State beat them in one of the wildest games where LSU almost came back and won, and that was a great game. So what was the number you just said?
I set it at 15. I think it's a different LSU team. So I set the line at 15.
Yeah. If you want to revisit close to game time, we can, but I'll take that line right now.
All right, let's do it. We'll do this, Josh.
Yeah. Okay.
Portion of the program brought to you by Zen Sports. Zen Sports is the new sports book in Tennessee, revolutionizing the way you earn sports betting rewards. That means no more deposit bonuses that turn into deposit nightmares. On Zen Sports, what you see is what you get. And with their cash rewards program, you get a lot of cash. For a welcome bonus, earn an unlimited 5% cash back on your betting volume for your first 15 days when you sign up with the code HOOKED. That's HOOKED. That's right, unlimited 5% cash back. Keep betting and keep earning with up to 3% cash back on your betting volume every month after that. And refer friends to earn a percentage of their betting volume as cash rewards too. Zen Sports is bringing the cash back to Tennessee. So if you bet big on sports, you want to be betting on Zen Sports. Zen Sports, betting just got better. Josh, I want to dive in real quickly on an On3 national analyst recently says that for Tennessee to really prove that they're consistently back, they have to beat Alabama or Georgia this year. And they have to kind of make that a regular thing. They can't accept, which they did last year. They beat Alabama last year, but they can't accept losing to them, both of them, on a yearly basis. Would you agree with that?
Both of them on an annual basis, yeah, that can't happen for Tennessee to be back because then Tennessee's not really competing for championships. I suppose they could go 10-2 and still be in the college football playoff, but then that becomes a huge ask to never slip up against anybody else if you're not good enough to beat Alabama or Georgia. So, on an annual basis, let's say over a 5-year period of time, Tennessee needs to have at least a few wins in those 10 games for sure. This upcoming season, I wouldn't say that. If Tennessee loses to Alabama and Georgia, as long as they continue to have success against the other opponents, then Tennessee can still be back. If they're winning, competing at a high level, blowing out some of the teams like they have, and recruiting at a high level, then that would tell me Tennessee has established its position as a top, let's say, 15 team in the country or program at current state. But over the next several years, yeah, Tennessee's going to need to beat Alabama. And I guess when the schedule is finally approved for whatever it's going to be in the future, we won't see Tennessee play Georgia every year. Most likely, if they go to a 9-game schedule, it's every other year. But the point would be made that you need to beat those elite teams several times, and I would agree with that. Fans would agree with that too. If Tennessee were to keep losing to them, no fan is in 3 or 4 years going to say, yeah, we're happy with where things are. Fans are going to be saying, why do we keep losing to the teams that we need to beat to get over the hump?
Yeah, it's kind of like it goes back to the 90s when Tennessee was rolling. I mean, people forget how big that 98 Florida win was because there was the whole Tennessee had Peyton Manning, their top 5 every year. But the question just was, why can't we beat Florida to get over the hump? What are they doing that we're not? Basically, that's what they all call.
You have your favorites to win it. And Florida at the time was the big boy you're trying to catch. They had a national title. They were winning SEC titles. And Florida had the winning streak against Tennessee. Right now, the big boys in college football from the SEC are Georgia and Alabama. And LSU's trying to establish itself as that again, and we'll have a chance this year. And Tennessee won there last year, but that's year one with Brian Kelly. The big picture would be Alabama and Georgia. They have set the bar for what everybody is trying to do. So if Tennessee can't beat them, either one of them again over the next few years, well, then Tennessee's below the bar of the standard that is set for best of the best football. So, yeah, Tennessee has to beat them to get over. At some point, you got to beat them, whether it's in the regular season or the playoff. At some point, you have to go through Alabama and or Georgia to win an SEC or national title.
So J.D. Pickle of On3, his exact quote was, to make the statement that you're for real and that what you're doing is going to have some staying power based on what they did last year, you've got to either beat Alabama or Georgia this season. Do you think if they lose to both of those teams there will start to be a concern that 2022 was a flash in the pan and not a sign of things to come?
I'm sure some people will say that if that's the case. But if Tennessee is 9-3 or 10-2, with the 2 losses being to Alabama and Georgia, then most people will say, hey, that's a really good season for Tennessee. And if that's the case, recruiting is going to be just fine. Tennessee will sign a top 5 to top 10 class, I think, most likely. And the offense is going to be really good. They're not going 9-3 and 10-2 without a high-level offense. So most people, rational people, in my opinion, would say, okay, lost to Alabama and Georgia. There's more work to be done. But Tennessee is one of the top teams in the SEC. If those are competitive games and Tennessee falls, then nobody with the brain is going to say that Tennessee football has fallen back off and they don't have a shot against Alabama or Georgia. So part of it is how do the results come? What do they look like in those games? But if Tennessee wins at least 9 games this season, that will be 20 wins in 2 seasons for Tennessee. People who know what Tennessee has been through and know what it takes to win 9 or 10 games in the SEC will give Tennessee credit for being in that position. And then everybody will agree, okay, there's more work to be done if you want to get over the hump against Georgia, because at that point, you'll have to go back to you'd have to go back 8 years since Tennessee last beat Georgia. That's too long. So, yeah, people will say there's more work to be done, and they'll be right about that.
Yeah, and particularly when I wonder if many people in Knoxville, and I actually see it this way too, see this year as somewhat of a transition year, because you got Hendon Hooker last year. You got Nico Iamaleava, who is probably going to be the starter in 2024. Mm-hmm. And no disrespect to Joe Milton, but kind of a transition year to stay afloat, keep this thing rolling, but probably not take it to the next level this year. Just make sure you don't fall from where you were. Kind of, you know what I would compare it to is, remember Clemson in 2014? They were between Taj Boyd and Deshaun Watson. And hopefully Joe Milton's better than Cole Stout was. But that 2014 year was kind of very clearly a transition year for Clemson, if you remember.
Yeah, it's either that or maybe you would say Deshaun, you had Kelly Bryant, and then Trevor Lawrence. But Joe is planning to be better than as good as the best and better than the in-between guys. His upside is much higher than Kelly Bryant for sure. We'll see. That's the big question. I mean, if Joe is close to what his potential is, then the offense should be close to what it was last season. It's not just Joe. It's the offensive line. It's replacing Darnell Wright, which is a big ask. I have a bigger question that needs to be answered actually replacing Darnell than replacing Hendon. But if Tennessee's able to stay as a top 10 offense nationally, where they've been the last couple of seasons in terms of scoring offense, then they're just going to be really good, because a bunch of the teams on Tennessee's schedule will have a difficult time keeping up with that. We'll find out when Tennessee goes to Gainesville how Joe and the offense handles a tough road environment where Florida knows we need to do whatever we can to stop or slow Tennessee's offense. Stop is too strong of a word, but slow and give our offense a chance, because they don't have Anthony Richardson. So the upside of Florida's offense, because of the quarterback position, is lower, in my opinion. So we'll get at least an idea there. And then over the next few weeks, we'll see with Joe Milton. But I promise Tennessee's internal expectation is we should be as good as last year. We should be better on talking about the offense. We should be better defensively, and we should have a chance to beat every team on the schedule, which the odds makers actually say. Tennessee right now would be projected to win 10 individual games. The over-under win total is 9.5, which is tied for the third best in the SEC, depending on where you look, but top 4 in the SEC. That's a tremendous compliment considering what Tennessee has to replace. Tennessee also has to go prove that is warranted. That's up to Joe Milton and Gerald Mincy and John Campbell coming in as a transfer, and all the other players that we're talking about this offseason.
Yeah, and Vegas is so fluid too, because theoretically, if you did the line right now, you would favor them to lose to Alabama and Georgia and then beat everybody else. But if the line goes throughout the season and Tennessee only has one loss at Alabama, and which Vegas would predict, and then they're 8-1, and Georgia's coming to town, you could see the line move towards Tennessee with Georgia going to Knoxville, and if they struggle a little bit at Ole Miss the week before or something like that. Very much so.
Yeah, maybe so. Part of that depends on how Tennessee does in its wins. But if Tennessee's a one-loss team going into the Georgia week, then Tennessee has outperformed expectations, because it's important to remember, while Tennessee would be favored in 10 of the games, the reason that the win total is a little bit lower is because the expectation is not that Tennessee wins all of those games. It's that Tennessee would be a favorite in each of those games. But if you do the probability is they slip up somewhere. Like last year, Tennessee slipped up against South Carolina, and Tennessee is hoping that doesn't happen this fall. But that Missouri game for Tennessee is one that the Vols have to be ready for, not because Missouri is going to be a great team, but if Tennessee's a one-loss team going to Mizzou, nobody's going to talk about the Missouri game that week. Everybody's going to talk about Georgia the following week. But Tennessee will have to focus on a road trip, and Missouri's going to know that Tennessee's thinking about a big game the following week, and Missouri is going to say to itself, we almost beat Georgia last year. Why can't we get Tennessee, catch them napping this year? So that's just an example of what you deal with when you're at this high level. Kirby Smart's biggest challenge is making sure that his team respects the opponent, because his team knows it's better than every opponent that he goes up against for the most part. That's part of Josh Heupel's challenge now is, hey, we won 11 games last year. We beat up on LSU. We beat Clemson. We beat Florida. We beat Alabama. So I need to make sure that my guys focus when they go to Florida this year, when South Carolina comes to town. South Carolina might be a little different because of the revenge factor, but Josh Heupel now is in that position where he has to make sure his team is focused on these games where Tennessee is favored. That's not been a problem for Tennessee's head coach in a long time. That's a new good challenge for Heupel to deal with now.
Yeah, and just it's funny you brought up Missouri, because before I let you go, you and I both were in agreement that Kentucky is their biggest trap game by far. But a couple of websites I was reading recently both mentioned Missouri, and I never thought about it, but we bring up the point they got a new offensive coordinator in Kirby Moore, who they brought from Fresno State. And let's be honest, Missouri lost, 4 or 5 games last year that they easily could have won. I mean, they probably had the most heartbreak of it. They could easily have been 10-3 last year instead of 6-7 or whatever they were. So are we underrating Missouri or not paying attention to how dangerous they are as a football team this year?
Some people are, because some people are probably laughing at us even discussing this. So that would be an example of underrating what Missouri is. I'm not saying Missouri is a top half of the league team. I'm not saying that at all. But again, South Carolina last year, they were coming off a horrible showing against Florida. And the talk that week was, this offense from South Carolina is embarrassing. They can't do anything. Then they put up 63. So that's a reminder of what you've seen does not exactly tell you what's going to happen next. And because of the placement of that game, like Caleb, a reason that we've talked about the Kentucky game being more challenging than most might expect is because of the placement on the schedule. You go to Lexington the week after going to Tuscaloosa, while Kentucky is off the week Tennessee's playing Alabama. Schedule-wise, that's an advantage for Kentucky. Doesn't mean Kentucky's going to win. Doesn't mean Kentucky's better. Certainly not that. But Tennessee playing Missouri on the road in November, the week before hosting Georgia, schedule-wise is a bit of an advantage for Missouri. First of all, they're at home. It's not a fun time of year to go to Columbia, and then the focus could be elsewhere. So it just presents other challenges that Josh Heupel will have to deal with. If Tennessee plays its best football or even close to it against Missouri, Tennessee will win. But if Tennessee turns the ball over and is not dialed in, and they have a couple of 3-and-outs early, and Missouri is able to put some points on the board, and all of a sudden there's that uh-oh factor, then you've put yourself in a risky position. So when we get to that game later on in the year, these will be the talking points, assuming Tennessee's had a good season. If we're wrong about how good Tennessee's offense is, well, that creates a different conversation. But if Tennessee's a really good team in November, then the week of the Missouri game, the talking points that week on this show, on every show, will be Tennessee needs to be focused. Tennessee can't go there and turn it over. Tennessee needs to be dialed in.
Yep. Josh, thanks so much for doing this today. We're going to troll Dave when he gets back next week. He's enjoying life on the beach. I was talking to Fred White yesterday. Here's another line. How red do you think he's going to be when he's back on Monday?
Dave, well, his baseline is like a 4, so he's going to be a 9 minimum when he comes back.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And when I come for him, I'll say I'm seeing red, literally. So Josh Ward of the Sports Animal. Josh, thanks so much. Have a great rest of your day.
You got it. Thanks, Caleb. Thanks, everybody.
Yep. Have a good one. That was Josh Ward. We appreciate him. This really helped the show going on today. We're about to take a break. When we come back, got an interesting take to give you guys on some new regulations on athletes that are good and bad for them. I think both might be good for college football. We're going to talk a little bit about that when we come back. Stick with us, just 2 minutes.
Sun, sand, and salt water, the beach is a very relaxing place. Unless you wear contacts. Ow! Open your eyes to the best the beach has to offer with LASIK vision correction from Campbell Cunningham Laser Center. Ah.
Hi, Mike Davis here with City Heating and Air, reminding you to always dare to compare. Our team provides quality local heating and air service, installation, and maintenance across East Tennessee. We use only the best equipment like American Standard heating and air conditioning for your residential, new construction, or commercial needs. Honesty, dependability, and customer satisfaction have been the cornerstones of our business since 1961. City Heat and Air.
Dare to compare.
Our family has been creating one-of-a-kind pieces of jewelry in West Knoxville since 1986. Each piece is a combination of unique processes that bring your idea to life. Every day in our shop, a truly special item with a story all its own is being manufactured in our facility, bringing the history and family sentiment into a whole new generation of life. We're grateful that you chose us to be Knoxville's best jeweler, a title that we value and respect. Because to me, being a jeweler and owning a jewelry store are not the same thing. I'm Rick Terry, I'm a jeweler, and we want to be your jeweler. Kingston Pike and Campbell Station Road in the heart of Farragut, and downtown on Gay Street right next to the Tennessee Theater.
When you want a hard cider that's easy to enjoy, one that's crafted to perfection, you need Tennessee Cider Company. Some say it's the signature cider of the South. Others say it's the cure to your craving. They all say you'll savor every sip. With a selection of ciders free to sample, all it takes is one taste. Visit tncidercompany.com for more information, as well as to shop our ciders and merchandise online. Thirsty yet? Doors open at 10 a.m.
Welcome back to the show. I've been neglecting the message board a little bit. I apologize to you guys. So I'm going to go pull up some things that we've looked at. Going to have a little fun with you guys real quick. Going back to John C. Calhoun. Yes, Rocky Top Tom brings up that he ran like 6 times himself. He was like Henry Clay. Yes, he was. William Jennings Bryan was another one of those guys. I believe William Jennings Bryan ran 3 times and lost all 3 times. That was kind of an interesting time in political history. And going back to the Georgia thing, you know, it is very, very murky. We were talking about that. Rocky Top Tom, if Kirby talks about this, it makes it real and affects the program. He's going to stay quiet, and the NCAA won't touch their golden program. It's up to the cops and the courts now. Yeah, and in many cases, you would say maybe it should be up to the cops and the courts. So it's kind of the legal system should handle a lot of these scandals that happen. So we'll just have to wait and see what goes on with that. Talking about the Tennessee football this year, Mr. Jones brings up that an improved defense gives offense more possessions and more scores. That's true. Also, Mr. Jones, think about this for Tennessee football, and this is a big part of what they do. They score so fast that they can generate huge leads early and pull their starters pretty quickly. And Tim Banks' defense makes it hard to come back. An underrated part of Tennessee's offense, a Tennessee scheme, is that Tim Banks he makes you work to move the ball down the field. So when Tennessee gets a big lead, they're actually built to hold their leads more than a lot of other programs that are such offensive juggernauts. So you also bring up Joe Milton learned a lot from Hendon Hooker about how to lead and be a good teammate. Yeah, that's going to be interesting to see. Motivated, dedicated joins in, says Georgia's 2023 team will be better than 2022, going to be crazy this fall. Man, that's a tall ask, but motivated, dedicated, I'm telling you, just because the team is better doesn't mean they have more success. Tennessee football's 1998 team was not the best team Philip Fulmer ever coached. The 95, 97, 99, and 2001 teams were all better. Maybe even the 96 team were better too. So just kind of something to look at. Travis says Ole Miss can certainly beat Georgia. Yeah, no, don't sleep on that. Lane Kiffin is a great schematic coach. We have no idea of what can happen with Ole Miss and Georgia the week before Tennessee. That's very, very possible that Ole Miss can beat Georgia. So definitely worth looking into. All right. Before I let you guys out of here, as if you guys don't have a choice to get out of here on your own, I actually wanted to bring up a couple of intriguing stories that I think are now connected that came out, I believe, I want to say on ESPN and other sites the other day. So one is friendly to athletes, one is not. So the first is one is a transfer portal window. The NCAA D1 Council is proposing a 30-day total transfer portal window as opposed to the current window that lasts 60 days total. This is a way to maybe narrow. So right now, as it goes, there's two transfer portal windows. The first is right at the end of the season into the off season, and then the second is right at the end of spring practice. This proposal is to narrow the transfer portal window so you don't see as much crazy movement going on. That would hurt the athletes to a degree. It depends on how they do it. And what I mean by that is I do think that there should be a transfer portal window after spring practice and right after the offseason. I think there should be a transfer portal window after both. And the reason there should be a transfer portal window after both is those are the two times you learn whether or not you're going to be a starter, whether or not you're going to play, and the athletes do deserve the chance to make that decision. Now, again, 30 days, I don't know how you do it. I think there's three windows. I think there's one at the end of the offseason, one at the end of spring practice, and then one into the summer. I don't think you need one in the summer. I'm just going to be honest with you. I think that the window should oh, no, I'm sorry, guys. I got it wrong. There is a 45-day transfer portal window and then a 15-day transfer portal window after spring ball. Yeah, they should shorten the transfer portal window after the offseason. They should. It should not be 45 days. I'm totally fine with you making it 15 days. So it's 15 days after the fall, 15 days after the football season, 15 days after spring ball. That's plenty of time for an athlete to make a decision, to see what they want to do. And I think that creates less chaos. A lot of this is about the work-life balance for coaches. Coaches are college football coaches are being overworked. I'm going to tell you guys that right now. And you can talk about the money they make, and they make a lot of money. They are paid very well. And that might lessen the sympathy many of you guys have for them. But our guy over at Late Kick Josh Pate had a great point. It doesn't matter how much money you make. The human body can only do so much. And college football coaches are being pushed beyond their limits with the work they have to do, because they have to literally constantly recruit, constantly target transfers, constantly make sure their roster stays together. I mean, this is the open transfer portal window and the recruiting calendar is wrecking the work-life balance of college football coaches. Dave has talked about this on the show, and it's a real problem. So I'm totally all for them shortening the transfer portal window. I'm for them shutting down recruitment during the season. And I know that's crazy. I think during the season, I think the only contacts you should have are scheduling official visits with recruits, quite honestly. There's too much work going on for college football coaches right now that I don't think they can all do. They also have, a lot of people don't know this, they have 10 staff members, but they have the smallest staff per player of any sport. There are usually 100 players on a team. That's 10 players per coach. No other school, if any other sport, if you have 4 coaches, you have fewer players per coach than that. So it's one of those where there needs to be a work-life balance when it comes to college football coaches. And otherwise, you're going to drive the best coaches out of the sport. You just are. You are. There are coaches who want to coach college football that literally they physically can't do what they have to do to keep their program afloat. It's getting crazy right now. And again, look, there's 1,000 other people that have way more impossible situations with their regular lives than college football coaches. I get it. But this is something that needs to be addressed from the NCAA's perspective. Now, from the other side, there is a new law that says there's a new NLI program, new policy that says athletes can back out of their national letter of intents without penalties under certain circumstances. So, for those of you who know, there is a commitment and then there is a signing. And obviously, when you give a verbal commitment, you can back out and decommit all you want. But once you signed your NLI in it, and you can't back out of that. Now, the new policy is that certain circumstances will allow athletes to back out of their national letters of intent. The certain circumstances are typically, according to ESPN, is, as far as I'm aware, has to do with coaches. So, for instance, if a coach is fired, a coach leaves for another job, things like that. So it could be a head coaching change, or it could, I believe it could be if a program receives a punishment probation-wise that we didn't know about. That is the policy on this. I think this is a good one. I think this is a very good policy. I think athletes sign to programs under certain conditions, and I think you should be able to back out of it if those conditions change. I think that way with contracts. I mean, that's how contracts are. The nature of contracts is there are certain conditions that you assume when you sign contracts that they change. I think ESPN should be willing to renegotiate its contract with the SEC because the SEC did that contract not knowing that Texas and Oklahoma were going to join. And I think there's an argument if the SEC took it to court for them to back out of the contract. Now, I don't blame ESPN at this moment because they're getting a sweet deal with the SEC with what they paid for. But I would argue that if it went to court, I would take that into account, that this contract was made before Texas and Oklahoma. The conditions changed. The SEC could back out and demand more money if they want. I think the same is with national letters of intent. They're not immune to the coaches and the programs. Spoiler alert, guys, players commit to coaches. Players commit to the possibilities of a program, not the program themselves. That's just how it goes. Mr. Jones, great point, like Florida not wanting to pay NIL to the recruits they promised. Now, that's a little bit tricky because technically NIL is not, it's not supposed to be used for recruiting. So I don't think you're going to be able to back out of your national letter of intent. I don't think you're going to be able to back out of your NIL. Excuse me, let me say this right. I don't think you're going to be able to back out of your NLI just because your NIL wasn't what it was. That's kind of a funny thing. But I will say that because technically NIL cannot be used during recruiting. But this is going to be intriguing because now when you start to see coaches getting fired, so for those who don't realize, this is why coaches get fired earlier. This is why they get hired earlier, all of that. So the early signing, but where this is very intriguing is the early signing period is still in December. There are still instances, outstanding circumstances where coaches aren't hired until January or late December after the early signing period. You're going to see a wave of backouts of NLI from the early signing period based on coaching changes that happen at the end of December, which still happens a lot of times now. What this is really going to do, though, is this was already happening. Most of the coaching changes were happening at the end of November anyway. This is going to be magnified and exploded to a different degree because the early signing period, athletic directors and administrators will be under a lot of pressure to find a coach before the early signing period now, which is in mid-December, because they can't afford to wait, because then players who signed would be able to back out of their national letters of intent. That's where this is going to change the most. So before we let you guys out of here, portions of the program are brought to you by Andy Mason. For the best prices and service in real estate in Knoxville, there's just one place, andymasonrealestate.com. Andy and his partners have been in the real estate business for a combined 40 years. They know how the market works and how to save you thousands of tens of thousands of dollars. Andy Mason at andymasonrealestate.com. Want to thank Caleb Jaru. Want to thank Josh Ward. Want to thank all you guys on the message boards for making this a fun show. We're doing our best here. We got one more day before Dave comes back. Jaru and I are going to be on for the whole show tomorrow. Appreciate you guys all tuning in today. You guys all have a great rest of your Thursday. Thanks a lot. With Caleb Calhoun, this has been a presentation of Off the Hook Sports.